Welcome back, everyone. On your Do Now, I wanted you to think about segregation, but in the modern world. Is segregation still a problem today? And based on a lot of the pictures we saw yesterday, you might want to say no, right? We don't have separate drinking fountains. We don't have separate areas of the bus. We don't have different voting laws or marriage laws, right? So, in a lot of ways, a lot of this segregation is gone. I want you to take a look at this map, though. This is the city of Baltimore. The different colors represent how many people in those neighborhoods identify as white Americans. So the darker the red means like 90% white. The very white yellow means like less than 10% white. And you can see within Baltimore, there are certain areas that are heavily black, certain areas that are heavily white. This looks a lot like segregation, right? Certain areas of the city for different races. Let's try something a little closer to home. This is Denver. This is a tougher map to see. Um, the red dot here is where Summit Academy is. The blue are neighborhoods that are mostly white. The orange are neighborhoods that are mostly Hispanic. The green, which are hard to see, are areas that are mostly African American. And again, we look at this map, it looks like Denver's kind of segregated too. Right? There's certain areas, certain neighborhoods that are mostly for one race and not another. So segregation still exists, but we have what we call de jure versus de facto. Um, de jure means by law. So we don't have any de jure segregation. There's no laws that say you have to segregate based on your race. What we do have is de facto. Like in reality, we do segregate. Now, our schools aren't segregated, not required based on your race, but because people live in certain neighborhoods, a lot of our schools are white or Hispanic or African American. All right, so segregation still exists in a different way. All right, so today we're going to start learning about how this segregation started to come to an end. So, quick refresher of how the Supreme Court works. This is the highest court in our country. Now, it doesn't rule like if people are guilty or innocent and send them to jail. What this court rules on is laws and whether or not laws are allowed. So, um, if you try to pass a law that says, freedom of speech is illegal, well, that's going to go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court's going to say, no, that you can't do that. So they'll throw that law out. But when the Supreme Court makes a decision, it's like a super law. You can't change it. You can't go against it. The Supreme Court has said it, and that's it. Yesterday, we talked about how there's a court decision around segregation, Plessy versus Ferguson, where the Supreme Court said segregation was allowed. They said you could separate people, but keep it equal. And this is what allowed all these Jim Crow laws to happen. This is what allowed the separate buses, the separate schools, drinking fountains, bathrooms, is because the court ruled it. Well, about 60 years later, there's going to be another court case. It's called Brown versus Board of Education. This is in Kansas. It's a family called the Brown family. That's their last name. They have these little girls who live very close to a school, a good school they want to go to, but it's a white only school. The school that their kids are forced to go to is on the other side of town across, I think they have to take several buses to a school that is not performing well. The family doesn't like this, so they sue the Board of Education of Kansas to get the right for their young daughters to go to the white only school. The Supreme Court takes this decision. They look at it and they decide in favor of the Brown family, and they say segregating schools is illegal. You can never be separate and still be equal. And this is really important because it's not just about the Brown family. The Supreme Court just said that segregation is wrong, which means all forms of segregation are also wrong. And this is what's going to jumpstart the civil rights movement, is because the courts say you need to end segregation. The laws say you have to end segregation, but a lot of these southern states don't. So there's a huge fight and protest to end segregation all over the country in all its different forms. Here's some pictures the day the Supreme Court ruled it with the small girl, Linda Brown. Here are the lawyers who argued. The guy in the middle is named Thurgood Marshall, very important guy. He ends up being on the Supreme Court himself. Very successful lawyers that argued to end segregation. We'll watch a video as a class to understand what happened with Brown versus Board of Education. You can pause this video. So the southern states didn't just accept this and be like, all right, well, we lost. Segregation's over. They're going to fight to try and keep it in every way they can, legally, but also with just straight up violence. And like I said, a lot of the civil rights activism is just to get states to obey the law that they're supposed to. Segregation is supposed to be gone. The southern states have to start listening. So there's a big movement for what we call integration. Sometimes it's called desegregation. This is where you stop separating people. You let people mix together. There's going to be a very famous occasion. It's in a high school in Little Rock, Arkansas, where it was a white-only high school. And despite the fact that the Supreme Court said you can't do that, Little Rock, Arkansas was still segregating. So all these activists, these young high school students say, we're going to go enroll in this school. They can't stop us. And they do. They enroll in the school. But the city of Little Rock did not like this. And a lot of the people in the community came out to fight against these kids going to school. Here is them on their first day of school, high school student trying to walk into the building. And you have adults yelling and throwing stuff at these kids, physically trying to stop them from going in. It gets so bad that the U.S. government has to send in troops to guard these students, to force the school to accept the African American students. And there were 9 of them. They call them the Little Rock Nine. Kind of a crazy situation. Imagine you having Navy SEALs having to protect you from your classmates. That's how much they hated the idea of integration. Again, we'll watch a video about this issue. We can pause this video for now. So our activity today, we're going to read a short part of a story from Melba Beals, who was one of the Little Rock Nine. The story we're going to read isn't her experiences in Little Rock. It's going to be her experiences the day that Brown versus Board of Education passed. So a few years before the Little Rock Nine incident, what did she experience? So I want you to read the story. Your goal is to make a T-chart like I'm drawing up on the board. On one side, you're going to write quotes that you found to be important and meaningful. On the other side, you're going to describe your reaction. How does this make you feel? What does it make you think about? And so read the story, and then what sort of reactions do you have?